All right. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you all again. And you can be seated. All right. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification Training course here. We're continuing on in the character unit. We're more than halfway through it right now in chapter 5. We're going to be picking up on page 116 today. And we're talking about the effects that character has in society, okay? Because this whole book, is based on character. And we're talking about the ripple effects. And, we use it a lot, in talking about the ripple effects. And I think most of us have been able to look at the example that William gave in last class, and in Peaceful Solution we use it as well in our PowerPoint presentations, and showing the ripple effect. And it was interesting because he said that when something drops into the water, like a pebble, or it could just even be a drop of water, that ripple is not just one drop of water that drops into there and then spreads out. And it was interesting because I really wanted to get the opportunity to, hopefully one of these classes, because it's used in several different scenarios in the Peaceful Solution, that statement. But I looked up the slow motion video of the ripple effect. Now, it's some big fancy scientific name of such a blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what the word was. But to us, it's the ripple effect. And it was interesting because it did the very thing that William said. And I had never known this, until I heard it in the class, and I went and looked at the video. I was hoping to present it to you today, but I couldn't get it all set up. But, when that drop of water, and they just used a drop of water, when that drop of water hit the surface of the water, it went down, and then it bounced back up. And then it went down again, and then half of that drop bounced back up. And it did it about 7 times before it was completely absorbed in the pond of water. Now, with our naked eye, we can't see this. These guys had cameras that can catch like 10,000 frames per second. But it was really interesting. If you get an opportunity to look at a video of that, go and see, how that actually takes place. But, we don't always see with our naked eye, the effects that we have on society around us. We don't always see the ripple effect. We just see one thing that we do, or one thing that we might refrain from doing, or one thing that someone does, or one thing that someone might refrain from doing. And we don't always, calculate how far and wide the effects of that choice or that behavior to engage in that particular choice will affect. And it's really interesting. The more you learn in the Peaceful Solution, the more, it becomes, well, it was used in the previous classes about, this being a program. Our brain is like a computer, and the information that we put into it is the program that runs that computer, okay? But it's really interesting. The more we learn this in the Peaceful Solution, the more beautiful it is we can see about how wonderful it is to learn positive character traits, and then put those things into practice in our everyday lives, every opportunity that we can. Because, when we were young, we didn't think about the lasting effects of the choices that we made. Most people didn't think about, well, if I, do a little drugs now, I'm not thinking about being a vegetable. I'm not thinking about getting drunk and getting in a car accident and being paralyzed for the rest of my life. Most people, when they're young, in their teenage years, that's kind of at their peak of their youth, they feel, we felt indestructible, like we can live forever, we can do anything and nothing could hurt us. But that's the furthest thing from the truth. And the more educated we are about these things, the more we do realize how precious, valuable, and in some cases, very fragile life can be. Okay? I've seen examples of people getting in severe car accidents and walking away with a scratch, or getting in severe car accidents and being banged all up and then making a full recovery when the doctor said, oh, you'll never walk again, or you'll never, be able to eat properly again, and they make a full recovery. And then I've seen examples where people have tripped, fell, hit their head, went into a coma and died. You just never know, about the effects that of the choices that we make or somebody else might make, and how it could affect us later on down the line, or somebody very, very distant away from us. And that's why it's important to govern the thoughts that come into our minds, and carefully consider the choices that we make, because irregardless of whether we know it or not, we're going to have an effect on society around us. So the goal here with what we're teaching in the Peaceful Solution is to make that a positive effect, to leave a positive mark on society. And, a lot of people have said, well, after I'm gone, after a few years, people will forget me. They'll forget who I am, but hopefully they'll remember the effect that I had on them, or the something beneficial that I did to serve society in a positive way. Okay, and so that's what we want to kind of focus on as we move forward here, and keep these things in mind. That nothing is like William said. You're only hurting yourself, because that's not true. We hurt other people, we hurt society. We can hurt the economy with choices that we make. And again, not those things aren't always considered. People don't think about the long-term effects of what their choices will make. Like, you think about the people in the who grew up in the time period of the 50s and the 60s. There was a lot of war taking place. There's, Vietnam, and coming off of the Second World War and things like that. And there were a lot of movements that were taking place as well, against the war, for the war, and some of them were positive, some of them were not, some of them were a mixture. Great intentions, but didn't have the foundation to make a totally positive move on. And a lot of things were done during those time periods, some of those things that William covered in the previous class. And the effects are lingering with the people who grew up in that generation. Not only with them, but their children and their grandchildren are suffering some of the consequences of the choices that were made during that time period. So we have to take these things into consideration. And of course, we can't go back and undo what was done in the past. We can't go back and undo what our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents did, the choices that they made. Only thing that we can focus on right now is building our mind with what is taught in the Peaceful Solution, the positive morals, the positive principles, starting to value making the change in our life that we desire to see in society or within ourselves. It's a saying that we use a lot: be the change you want to see. Be the change that you want to see in society. Well, it starts with us, and as we said, or will say, as it is said, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and that's the focus of the Peaceful Solution: is on the individual who's reading or who's receiving that information from a teacher. If you're in a situation of a classroom or so forth, it gets us to look internally, to look at ourselves and to examine ourselves and the environment and the influences that affected who we are right now as an individual. And then use those principles that are given in the Peaceful Solution as kind of a benchmark to say, well, yeah, I'm lacking that. Well, I have that one, or I need to do this one really bad, and then start to make those changes step by step by step by step. And don't get discouraged if we don't see the changes coming, immediately. If the teacher doesn't see the changes coming in the students immediately, or if the students don't see the changes taking effect immediately, because it's step by step by step. The thing is consistency, being consistent with diligently applying these moral principles in our lives, and of course, diligently teaching them to the students every opportunity that we have. That's something that we cover in the very beginning of the manual here. At the beginning of every manual, every opportunity that's given in the classroom, use it to refresh in the minds the lessons that the students have learned. So these things can always be in the forefront. Our minds are kind of like, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. We're not thinking about it. So we kind of have to put reminders before ourselves. I know me, I have to have sometimes little reminders set in various places where I go to remind me of certain things, goals that I might want to accomplish, or even characteristics that I might want to overcome, whether it's, character related traits or personality traits. I was telling someone that, I really didn't grasp procrastination, right? Procrastination. I'm telling myself a little bit here, but I didn't realize until later on in life that I kind of had a problem with procrastination, and I didn't understand that until I started to educate myself about what procrastination was and how I didn't like it when other people procrastinated in regards to things, that had to do with me, like, man, what's taking so long? When are you going to do this? But I kind of didn't mind doing it when it came to other people. But the more I understood about that, the more I saw how this trait, this personality trait, can trickle over into characteristics. A person who is a procrastinator, they can actually develop the characteristic of being irresponsible, putting things off that they need to get done, irresponsible and things of that. And I realized, well, that's not what I want to be. I want to be known as a person of integrity, a person who is responsible and who could be trusted with things. And so I made a determination valuing the opposite of procrastination, being diligent and dependable and so forth, goal oriented and working to accomplish those goals. I said, I'm going to overcome this personality trait of procrastination first thing tomorrow. And that was okay. No, you guys, yeah. No, that's a procrastinator's joke. No, but I mean, once we learn things, the more we educate ourselves in this material, the more we get to see where we need to make improvements. And so, a humble person will acknowledge the fact that, there are imperfections in our lives, imperfections in our character, and there are things that we can find right here in these pages, the covers of this book, information or facts that we can find that will help us to overcome those things and develop a positive character to affect society in a positive way. Well, William left off last class in talking about, he covered page 115. Well, he covered several pages, but the last page he covered there was 115, and he was talking about, if you look at that last paragraph there, it says, maintain, on page 115, maintain a positive moral character and set your mind in advance not to be influenced or talked into trying drugs, abusing alcohol, dangerous driving, or experimenting with sex. If someone offers you a joint, be responsible and say no. In today's society, I mean, they kind of look at marijuana as like they look at cigarettes. Doesn't make it any less detrimental to a person. It's just as dangerous as cigarettes. But a lot of teens and preteens are involved with things like grandma's prescription drugs. In the cabinet of grandma or grandpa or uncle or aunt or mother or father prescription medicine cabinet. I mean, that's what they're into. In addition to these other things too, Percocets and Mollies and all these other different things that they get to kind of numb the pain of what they're going through in their life, or maybe just to make them feel great and to have a high. You think about life in general, and if a person is truly enjoying life, what need is there to escape from reality of it, right? So the desire to even do something shows that there's something lacking in their life. They're not achieving success. They're not joyous. They don't have peace, right? And so the drugs don't get rid of the problem, right? It just numbs the pain, so to speak, for a short amount of time. But in the process, it's also doing damage to the body and the mind. It's doing damage to the organs in the body. When those things are taken habitually, and as was covered in last class, sometimes just the very first time when those things are taken, somebody who has an unknown cardiac deformity can have a massive heart attack and drop dead instantly, right? So we don't want to put ourselves in risk-taking behaviors or put ourselves in a situation where, our life could be severely altered in a negative way, either through death or through some type of permanent injury. So it says here on page 115, it says, say no. If someone offers you a drink, be courageous and say no. You see, now this is a part of what courage is, right? Not conforming to what we think is popular and what everybody else might like or what everybody else might want to see or what I need to do in order to have a friend. A friend would never encourage you or influence you to do something that would bring harm to your health. or it could jeopardize your life or it could embarrass you. I mean, sometimes people will do things like a big thing that I remember seeing growing up, and it wasn't a drug, but, when people go to sit down, someone will pull a chair out from underneath them. And everybody got a big laugh out of it and everything. Several people have like cracked their tailbones as a result of that. It's all funny until somebody gets hurt, like the teacher says. But really, it's not. But I mean, people do those things in order to gain acceptance from other people. But we should, and a friend should never do anything like that to you. They should be looking out for your best interests, and we'll get into that in the next book there, Unit 2, in Acceptance, on what a true friend is. But what you're learning here are some of the characteristics that we're working to develop within our own lives. We should also be looking for those characteristics in our friends as well. So be courageous and say no. If someone says to you, oh, come on, everybody's doing it, have enough self-respect to say no. Say no. You don't have to give a long explanation. Just say no and mean it. Keep in your mind that poor choices can affect you for life. They can also affect your family and your community, and that's what we're going to get into today as well. But look back up to, and keep this in mind, let's see, that's the top paragraph there. That's the remainder of the paragraph from the previous page, second sentence there. It says, these programs, it talks about ways of coping with ever-increasing numbers of teens risking their health. These programs basically fit into two categories: prevention and intervention. And of course, the peaceful solution works in both situations, right? In teaching a child when they're young, or even a person who isn't young, but before they've made a series of bad choices that can greatly alter their life, teaching them, that is prevention. You've heard the statement, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure, right? How many of us would rather take a drug to feel better or just not get sick at all? I think most of us would much prefer not getting sick at all. I mean, I think all of us have had, illnesses where we were, fatigued and body chills and severe pounding headaches and body aches and things like that. And we couldn't wait till the time that thing was over, And as soon as we started to feel better, it was almost like we were ready to go outside and run a race, because it was just having that normal feeling of just no aches and pains in your body. It felt so great as compared to what we were feeling just a few days ago. Well, this is what the peaceful solution is working to do, to save us from the aches and the pains that we'll bring into our lives from the choices that we make, by teaching us in advance to avoid certain behaviors, certain influences, right? You can't control everything that comes into your mind as far as an influence is concerned, but you can choose what to focus on and what to let go or what to ignore. So let's look back to page LP5D there. LP5D. And we're going to read again procedure 5. Excuse me. Procedure 5 there on page LP5D. It says, explain to students that negativity is not the only thing that can affect our society and our world. Both our society and our world need to rely upon people with positive character to be the backbone for a civilized, peaceful way of life. Have students turn to page 117, which we're going to read here after the 116, and read the section entitled Positive Character Also Ripples Outward. Then have them read Positive Moral Character Can Affect the World on page 120, and emphasize that society must have morals that are internalized by all in order to have a safe and peaceful world. Encourage students to make a difference in society by consistently practicing positive character traits. And it's interesting, there was something I actually heard, I don't know if it was on one of the NPR stations or something, but it was a quote that it was one of the men who were involved in, oh wait, here it is right here. I'll have to get the name for you, but it was talking about, it was dealing with the nuclear weaponry, right? Atomic bomb. It was around that time period. I think Oppenheimer was credited with it, but I'm not exactly sure if it was him who said it or not. He might have quoted it from someone who said it prior to him, which a lot of people do. But the quote was, "Knowledge is a fire that, in absence of morality, will destroy us all." Knowledge is a fire that, in absence of morality, will destroy us all. You know, and you think about people who have a great amount of knowledge in, just say, computer technology, right? And they take that knowledge and they use it to hack into, a database of a bank and withdraw a whole bunch of funds or transfer a whole bunch of funds to another bank account offshore or something like that. Think about the people who suffer as a result of that. We have to have a combination of knowledge with morality or rules that govern peaceful human interactions, right? Because just having the information is not enough. Now, how do we use that information to be a benefit in society? Okay, and this is where the quote in The Peaceful Solution, knowledge is power. When we take that knowledge and couple it with what we're learning here in The Peaceful Solution, you can affect a lot of power and influence, amongst your peers. Even without knowing it, they'll look at you as a person of integrity. They'll actually look at you as a person that they want to imitate. When we talked about VIP, imitate or emulate or copy, right? Because you're setting a great example, and they see the benefits that come from that great example, as opposed to, the guy in the movie who can beat everybody with one finger. What do you accomplish with that? So let's look at page 116. Let's turn to page 116. Because this finishes off these negative choices and how they affect society as a whole. Let me make sure I got my papers here. Yep. And this is the cold, hard facts. Cold, hard facts. And it says addictions, because we're talking about, came off a little bit about drugs and drinking and so forth from page 115. It says addictions lead to theft. People have been known to steal money from their parents, brothers, and sisters to buy drugs and alcohol. They also steal bottles of liquor from their homes. And a lot of people, they used to, I knew people growing up who that was their thing. They would raid the liquor cabinet at their parents' place, and they take, a couple cups out, and then they replace it with a little water. So by the time mom and dad got to drinking the alcohol, it wasn't 80 proof no more. It was like 5 proof, but they did that because they wanted to, be popular. They probably saw mom and dad drinking it, so they wanted to drink it too, But the problem with that, again, the knowledge, or without the morality, or not having boundaries or guidelines, to tell a person, this is beneficial, or this is okay to do, but this is how it needs to be done. This is how it needs to be handled. Like something as simple as a hammer, right? A hammer is a tool that can be useful for many, many, many things, right? And that's a hammer. You can swing that hammer and you can hit something and break it if you want to, but you have to have the understanding, or the rules or the boundaries, and how that hammer needs to be used in order to use it responsibly, to use it safely, to build instead of destroy, unless you're doing demo or something like that. But you still have to use the tool properly. Otherwise, you can bring harm to yourself or somebody else, right? And it's the same thing with this information, with these these points that we're covering. If it's not used properly, then it can bring harm to yourself or other people. So they also steal bottles of liquor from their homes as well. Let's see here. Let me look at, I had some facts here that I wanted to bring to your attention regarding that. The point here, addiction leads to theft. Because, when a person becomes addicted to a drug, or even to alcohol, I guess it really could be to anything. People could be addicted to the internet, or things that they see on the internet. When that takes hold of the mind, it's almost like, certain addictions, they bring about the release of endorphins and dopamines and everything. The science calls it the feel great hormones. And people like that feeling when they do those things. So chasing after that feeling, their mind gets clouded, and then they'll start doing things like stealing money. And usually parents, brothers, sisters, and so forth. Why? Why first? Because it's the most accessible. They live with their parents. They know their family. It's easy to get in and out of their homes. They know the things that they have. They've seen the jewelry. They've seen where they keep their purse and hang their keys. It's easily accessible. But when that runs out, or the parents or the family members finds out, hey, I can't really trust you. You're coming in here stealing my stuff. Then they have to start going and doing it to strangers. Okay. And eventually they get caught. But here it says committing crimes to obtain drugs. And this was a survey. And this is actually from 2004. I picked it off of a few years ago, but it says, according to a 2004 BJS, which is Bureau of Judicial Statistics survey, an estimated 17% of state prisoners and 18% of federal inmates reported that they committed the crimes for which they were incarcerated in order to obtain money to buy drugs. And that's 17 and 18% of that. And it says those who committed crimes to obtain money for drugs are more likely to commit property crimes and drug offenses, that is trafficking, than they are violent crimes and public order offenses. All right. So that was from 2004, 18 and 17%. Well, I looked at the numbers there from 2004 just to kind of get an idea of, just to kind of be fair, because it's not 2020. In 2004, the number of persons held in state or federal prisons or in local jails, which they didn't consider that in this report, from 1995 to 1994, and they give the years here. Well, in 2004, the half year of 2004, federal prisoners in custody were right at 169,370. Okay, and remember what we said, federal inmates or federal prisoners, inmates reported that they committed crimes for which they were incarcerated to obtain money to buy drugs. That was 18%. So approximately 30,000, a little under 31,000 prisoners, were incarcerated who fell into that category. For the state, it was 1.2 million people that were incarcerated, and for them it was 214,976. So it's a lot of people. And just to give you an idea, an idea of what that costs, because we're talking about the ripple effect here. It's not just that people, and of course, they need to be educated is what the goal is, right? Sticking them behind the bar, and then a lot of states have started to enact programs or to release non-violent offenders, right? And a lot of people have gone to prison because some states or some cities have what they call a 3-strike rule, right? 3 strikes of getting caught selling or in possession of drugs, after the 3rd time, where you're going to prison for 5-10 years or whatever the legislation determines. Well, that doesn't fix the problem for the person, because, when people go to prison, they learn more skills when they're there. And, unless they have a focused and determined mind to come out of that a better person, and some people do. But when people go to prison, they don't just go to prison. Somebody has to pay for their room, their food, their clothing, their medical treatment, and so forth, and that comes in the form of federal and state tax dollars. Well, in 2004, the average cost to house a prisoner in a federal prison was just a little over $23,000, while the average cost to house a state prisoner was just a little under at $22,650. Well, for the state, just based on the numbers of the 30,000 people, of that 18% of federal inmates, not the whole 169,000, but the 18% of that, It's $706 billion a year to take care of those men and women who are incarcerated because of theft in order to get money to buy drugs. On the state level, that number is $4.7 billion a year. Okay. And then when those people are released from prison, and if you didn't know, the United States, has a recidivism rate of almost 60%, which means those who get out, 60% of them, they go right back in. Okay. So the cycle continues. But that's a huge amount. That's a combined amount of about $711 billion, and that is annually. That's just for 1 year. Now, I don't know about you, but I could think of many things that we could do with our tax dollars that could actually produce some really great benefits for society as a whole. So that just gives you a little bit, because that ripples outward. A person might not think about the fact that a certain percentage of their tax dollar goes towards things like this. William covered some of the things last week as far as, the programs that the government puts out, Medicaid and WIC and things of that nature. But incarceration is a big one too. It's a big spender. Even though a lot of the prisons now are privatized, they still get money from the government to run those prisons. But with the peaceful solution, eventually we won't need prisons anymore. And men and women will be trained before they get there, before they would make bad choices, to stop and think, consider their options, and proceed with something that's going to benefit themselves and others. So let's look at the second cold, hard fact there. The things that were important to you won't be anymore. And then we're still talking about, people, engaging in drugs and alcohol and risky behaviors in order to fulfill or to satisfy that addiction there. Things that were important to you won't be anymore. Things that you once valued, you don't value anymore. Even as much as hygiene, right? Sometimes people get so down in their way of thinking that they don't even care about their hygiene. This is how low the self-respect can get when a person is addicted to these substances. And the sad thing is, a lot of times they don't see it, right? They don't see. This is why sometimes you need an outside source to help you and say, hey, listen, your life's kind of spiraling downward here. Let me help you, right? And this is what a teacher does. They look out for their students, and this is a part of what compassion is, seeing someone suffering and having the desire to relieve them of that suffering. And one of the best things you can do is teach a person to make moral choices, sound moral choices, like we teach, or like it is said, give a man the fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man the fish, you feed him for a lifetime, because now he can make choices that will enable him to continually produce the outcome, the beneficial outcome in his life that he desires to see. People who engage in these risky behaviors lose their interest in their family, school, and extracurricular activities, just to name a few. Their entire life will begin to revolve around how they can get the next drink or hit, or who they can steal from, and where they can go and hide so they won't get caught. All right. That word there, revolve, their entire life will begin to revolve around. It means to treat as the most important point or element. To treat as the most important point or element. To move in a circle or central axis. And it kind of makes me think about, of course, when they're wanting to get this fixed, that's the most important thing to them. They don't care, who they affect or how it affects them, right? In most cases. But it makes me think about a revolving door. How many of you have had the privilege of getting stuck in a revolving door? And especially if you're not used to going through one of those things, they can be kind of a little bit imposing and intimidating, and especially if you don't like going around in circles a lot. But if you don't know when to step out of a revolving door, or when to step in, well, in this case, step out, what are you going to do? You're going to keep going in circles and circles and circles and circles, until hey, I need to get out of this thing, or until somebody goes, hey, get out of that thing, right? Otherwise, you're just stuck in there. And this is what it is when people are they have these addictions that they're trying to continually satisfy. It's like a dog chasing their tail. They're just running around in circles and circles and circles, and they're never satisfied with that drug or with that alcohol, because why? Eventually that runs out. It wears off. It wears away. And the body is pretty adaptable. It develops a tolerance to things. And so what do they have to do? They got to drink more. They got to smoke more. They got to shoot up more and things like that. In fact, in regards to these drugs here, that point there that was covered last class, that the author mentioned, the 30% increase in shopping bills, has to cover, is due to theft. And it's theft from employees, but also theft from people who make these decisions as well. But I'm sure some of you have heard about the opioid epidemic, right? The opioid epidemic, and it was really in the forefront of the news for, I don't know, probably about a year or two. It wasn't anything new, but it had really started to become a headline because so many people were dying as a result of it. Well, a lot of these people started on opioids, from post-surgery or car accidents, and these things were prescribed to them, but they got addicted to these things, right? And so because they couldn't keep getting prescriptions, they started to find other ways to get that fix or to relieve that pain. Well, in 2019, this is not that far ago, this is from the drugabuse.gov, 50,000 people in the United States died from opioid-involved overdoses. 50,000 people. That's almost about the third of the size of Abilene, and some of the surrounding areas. Okay, 50,000 people just in 1 year alone died from opioid-involved overdoses. The misuse of and addiction to opioids, including prescription pain relievers, heroin, and synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, is a serious national crisis that affects public health as well as social and economic welfare. It got so bad, I believe it was in Ohio, that they actually had to bring in trucks, refrigerated trucks, to store up bodies because the morgues couldn't take in the bodies from the overdose deaths. That's how much of an epidemic it was just in the United States. So it says here it affects public health as well as social and economic welfare, and that report came out March 11, 2001. Well, the cost of drug abuse to the workforce, because we're talking about economic welfare here, and when we think about it, most of us don't think very much when we go to, let's just say you go to the clothing store to buy a shirt or a pair of shoes or a belt or a pair of pants or whatever. We just go look through the racks, pick something, find something that's in our price range, and then we go and we buy it and we take it home. But do we think about, I don't, but unless I stop and really do think about it for a certain reason, but the process and the amount of people that it took to produce that shirt or those pair of shoes or that pair of pants or that belt, from the raw materials through the manufacturing and distribution systems, services, all the way to it being put on that shelf in the store. A lot of people were involved in that process. And so if somebody is not doing their job, or a group of people throughout that chain is not doing their job in order to get that product, that end product to the customer, that's going to affect the output, right, for that company. And they're going to not produce as much, or they're going to have to scramble and hire more employees, which is more costly than keeping an employee. But this here says this is the cost of drug abuse to the workforce. And it says the impact on workplace productivity, drug abuse costs the nation more than $120 billion per year in lost productivity, according to the National Drug Intelligence Center. $120 billion per year. And this was from 2020. No, yeah, 2020. And if you look at the cost of theft per year in the United States, you look at in 2015 it was $44 billion per year, and in 2020 it was $62 billion per year. So I'd say, we're not like fixing any problems yet. In fact, it's costing us even more. And you think about that, when you think about that 30% increase in your products, in our products that we have to buy, think how much more we can get with the money if theft wasn't a problem. And the companies did not have to mark up the cost of the product in order to cover that. I remember my mom and people that are in my mom's generation, my parents' generation, telling me, how it was so nice, you can get a gas for 25 cents. That'd be nice. 25 cents a gallon. You can get 25 cents of gas still today. It's just not going to get you much. Candy, you can actually get penny candy, and that caught my attention when I was a child, because I'm thinking, man, I got like $1. I can get 100 pieces of candy here. You can't do that anymore. Not only inflation, but just these costs are factored into it. People going into the stores and taking things, stealing things, whether it's just because of greed or to support a habit, to take it and sell it for very cheap so they can get a few bucks to go and get their next hit. But it affects the nation. $120 billion lost in productivity. And from the standpoint of a company, that means that they're not able to either provide that product to the consumer, or they're not able to hire people, right, to work, to provide them with a job and an income to take care of their family, because they have to make up the cost of that loss of theft somewhere else. All right. So let me see here. Do I want to? Nah, we don't have to cover that part. Just another day. I was looking at that because you think about when people, they engage in these type of activities and they steal from family members and friends, and they, and sometimes people even lose their lives as a result of their addictions and their habits and things of that nature. And we don't always think about the amount of people that we affect. And I was just trying to look up and get the numbers, and there's several different statistics that they have on there that they try to calculate, which is virtually impossible because people deal with different amounts of people on a daily basis. But it says on the average, we live for 78.3 years, and most of us remember people we met at after age 5. Assume we interact with new people on a daily basis in cities, 365 days a year, plus leap year days, 365.24. In total, 78.3 minus the 5 years, because you do interact with people, but they're not considering that, times 3, that would be 80,000 people in a lifetime, on average. That's just on average, that we interact with, right? And we don't always realize, what type of effect our interaction will have on that person, because that's literally just a snapshot in our life. Whether it was a positive example, whether it was a negative example, whether we were a leader or a teacher or a supervisor or a parent, or whether we were a child or a student or or a worker. We had some influence or impact in that person's life, and you never know if that will ripple outward and affect that other person for the rest of their life. You think about people who are involved in road rage, right? And someone goes and they curse them out. Well, they're not gonna curse you out because they don't want to damage their new car or anything like that and risk being chased home or anything. But they go home and then they take it out on their wife, or they go home and take it out on their child, or they go home and they take it out on their pet or something like that. Because of that one interaction that you had with them. Now, that is no justification, but sometimes this is how these things ripple outward. And if people don't know how to control and govern their emotions, then one negative thing that we do to somebody can impact their whole family, right? It can impact their whole workday. So this is why it's important to carefully consider, emotions, they come and go, they have their highs and lows, but we don't ever want to make choices based on emotions. We want to make them based on facts and based on the desire to bring about a peaceful outcome, not something that's going to spring up and cause retaliation. Well, let's look over to page 117 here. Try to get some of this covered. So those were the cold hard facts. Talked a little bit about some of the negative things and how it ripples outward and affects people, and what you can do to prevent from being someone who negatively impacts a person's life. We'll look at the positive character here on page 117, because positive character also ripples outward and it affects others. Well, just as negative behaviors ripple out their devastating effects, positive character ripples out positive effects. And we recognize the positive character rippling out through the behavior. So we see the negative behavior, we see the positive behavior. And of course it ripples out and it affects people in a positive way. This is how we can affect others in a positive way. Like I said earlier, even people we don't know, half a world away, we can have some type of a positive impact on them. You think about those who are watching this class who, might be, in the continent of Asia or Africa or in Europe or something like that, and who take, a seed of this knowledge, plant it in their mind, and think about it and start to apply it in their life, and they put that into practice in their interactions with other people. But we've never met them. We've never sat down and had a conversation with them. They're not a part of our family, but those words that we said at that time positively impacted them. And 2, 3, 4, who knows, possibly 100 or 1,000 people halfway over on the other side of the world are receiving benefits from that. Okay? So never underestimate your example, your positive example. Never underestimate making the benefits of consistently making a right choice. Consistently. Even when you're alone. When we choose to consistently demonstrate positive character, the effects ripple outward, giving others hope that our society and world can change for the better. And I've heard the statement made by people when somebody does something great, or, they're having a hard time, and say they're off to the side of the road and they got a flat tire, and, cars are just blowing by them, and somebody stops and helps them change the tire. Maybe they're handicapped or, got a broken leg or arm or something like that. And they make the statement, because everything's put on the news or social media now, my faith in humanity has been restored. 5,000 people drove by me and this one person stopped and helped me. Okay. And people really, they do. They tend to lose faith in humanity because we've grown so accustomed, to seeing so much negativity in the news that we forget that there are still people that are doing moral things, that are making right choices. And like we're going to cover here, they call these people superheroes, but they're really not superheroes. They're ordinary people doing extraordinary things. For instance, did I skip that? Yeah. For instance, if everyone in a community decided to practice honesty, then there would be no theft in that area. There would be no muggings, pickpockets, or burglaries. There would be no need to lock the doors to your home or your car. And if you forgot your wallet or purse in your school cafeteria, it will be returned to you with all your money in it. And I was thinking about this the other day because, toward the weekend, sometimes I'll park my trailer at my shop, and then I'll lock everything up, and then I'll head home. And it was interesting because about a day later, I was doing something in my truck, and I opened the door, and there I saw my hitch lock sitting on the floorboard of my truck. And I thought, oh no, my trailer is left unlocked and vulnerable, 15 miles away from me. And, and I thought, oh man, I hope nobody hooked up with that thing and just drove it right off, And I made it back, and it was still in the same spot. So I was really thankful, relieved. But think about if we were in a society where honesty was practiced. I'd look in there and I go, oh, forgot to put my hitch lock on there. Oh, well, it'll be there when I get there the next day. You wouldn't be worried about it. You know, oh, I forgot to lock the front door. We're going to be out of town for a couple of days. You're going to come home and everything's going to still be there. If your door was flinging open, some neighbor would probably call you and close your door and pull it closed for you. You know, I mean, people would be looking out for one another. This is why these neighborhood watches got started, right? The neighborhood watches to watch out for, the neighbors in the neighborhood and to prevent crime or to report crime when they saw it. They sometimes they do it as a preventative measure. Sometimes they do it as a result of a series of crimes or burglaries that had already taken place. So we need to form a neighborhood watch. And sometimes the people will get together in pairs and they'll, walk outside in shifts with their flashlights and their little sticks and their dogs and everything just to present a presence, right? Not to go out there and beat people. Sometimes you do have vigilantes out there, but just to create a presence that, hey, there are people out here watching, to protect our property and our belonging. We'll call the authorities if we need to. Now, whether that works or not, I don't know. But when people have a desire to break the rules, they'll find a way to break the rules. It doesn't matter if you had 100 people out there watching. They're thinking, well, there's 100 opportunities of somebody not being home, right? People will find a way to break the rules if that's what's in their heart. So the ripple effect from such a phenomena, that is a community where everyone decided to practice honesty, would stretch far and wide. First off, that city, that community would be it would be a community that would be held in high esteem. It would be a community that people would look to move to or look to set up and establish a business in. There's been many instances in cities where the community was so violent that large corporations had to pick up and move out because it was too risky. Their employees were getting mugged, their cars were getting stolen, they weren't coming to work, there was a reduction in productivity, there was vandalism when the place was closed, and so it's too costly. Let's move someplace where it's safer, right? And so what does that do? That hurts the community because people who depended on going to that place for work, well, a lot of them, they can't travel 100 miles away or whatever to go to work. And if they do, they're going to lose all their money in travel expenses, okay? So, these things, they affect the community in a negative way when they're not practiced. But it was stretched far and wide. First, the number of crimes, arrests, as well as the police officers on patrol would be greatly reduced. Since there would be no shoplifting, the price of merchandise would also be significantly reduced. And a lot of times in today's society, you see, besides for theft, you see places will raise prices, right, just because there's a low demand for something. Right, in order to get more money, which is price gouging, but they'll do it just slightly where it'll be under that price gouge mark. And it's like, because there's no longer a demand for it, that didn't make the price of the product that's on the shelf go up, but they'll do this. But in a place where everybody practiced honesty, there'd be no need to do that. Stores wouldn't have to raise their prices because of theft or any type of gouging or anything like that. Everybody would be able to afford to go shopping there because the prices would be lower. They'll be able to get more to feed their families. Okay, it's pretty expensive to feed a family in today's society right now. I don't know. It was back in it was probably 2003 or 2004, and one of the people I was talking to, I think they had about 3 or 4 children, I think, and she was telling me what her grocery bill was, weekly grocery bill. She said it was about $450 to $600 a week. That was her weekly grocery bill, and she went grocery shopping every week, and I'm thinking 400, man, it would be a lot of ramen noodles for me, because that's a lot of money. And this was 16 years ago. 16 years ago. Well, price of food hasn't gone down, right? So, these things are costing more and more and more in society. It makes it more difficult. I saw a documentary where it was talking about healthy eating, and, the parent was kind of frustrated because it costs so much to buy what we call organic now is what everybody ate like, 100 years ago. There was no organic because that's just what grew out of the ground. You grew it, you ate it. You planted it, you watered it, you grew it, you pulled it in, you harvested it, and you ate it. Well, now it's a big market. So this carrot that was grown 100 years ago is now considered an organic carrot because it doesn't have a pesticide put on it. So we'll charge 2 times the amount for it, right? Okay, and so she said, it's frustrating because I have to decide between eating healthy, feeding my family, she had a couple of children, or just eating at all. She's like, I can go to the McDonald's or, any type of fast food place. It wouldn't have to be McDonald's. I can spend $20 and feed a family of 4 easily. She said, I know it's not the healthiest, but I can't go and buy salad and tomatoes and vegetables and fruits because it's going to cost me hundreds of dollars, right? Well, we're going to see a change in our society as these moral principles start to be adhered to. People will be able to enjoy and easily get the things that they need to have an enjoyable and healthy life. So, since there would be no shoplifting, the price of merchandise would also be significantly lowered. In addition to this, there would be a ripple effect of peace and security throughout the community. The above scenario might sound too great to be true, and you're probably thinking, yeah, right, not in my lifetime. But every once in a while, there are articles about individuals who choose to be honest, compassionate, courageous, and responsible. If one person, just one person, can learn the value of having a positive character and treating others with compassion and respect, it gives hope that others can as well. It also gives encouragement to others when they see sometimes people just need to see somebody else do it, right? They need to see that first person jump in the pool first, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. And then they're like, he's all right, in a positive way, of course, like mom used to say, if such and such jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? Well, in a positive way, doing positive things. And so when we see people make positive choices, sometimes it gives a person who might be thinking about that, but might be a little bit afraid for whatever reason, inhibitions they have in their mind. When they see someone else doing it, it gives them the courage and the inspiration to do the same thing. If one person can do it, why can't others? Our society calls people who demonstrate positive character traits and go out of their way to help others heroes. In actuality, they are ordinary people with moral character doing extraordinary things. Okay, and this is what the Peaceful Solution defines a hero as. Headlines like boy finds purse and returns it to elderly woman, or young girl rescues toddler from drowning, ripple outward, giving hope that these same positive character traits can be internalized. Remember, it's important to internalize the things we read, internalize the character traits, the moral principles that we learn, the value, to value them and to make them a part of us. A person might not get an opportunity to be a hero every day, but by demonstrating positive character traits in one's daily interactions with others, one too can motivate and encourage others to be positive too. And not only are you being a hero, in that, for lack of a better words here, as the example is given, you're also being a positive influence and a friend. You qualify to being a friend. It doesn't necessarily have to mean you have to sit there and talk with them for 5 years or anything, but that's a friendly act. That's an act of kindness when you show or demonstrate these positive morals towards other people. And you might never ever talk to them ever again in your life, right? But you've impacted their life in a positive way. And it's not for reward. You're not doing it for reward. We shouldn't be doing it for reward, but we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I always encourage the students to make these choices, irregardless of what everybody else is thinking. Do it or thinking about you. Do it because it's the right thing to do, and the rewards from that will be long lasting. So we're going to stop right there on page 117 and pick up on page 118. Next class will be Wednesday, 4/14 at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. We look forward to joining with you for that class, and I hope you enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.